Welcome to Jude, the podcast. I am David Jude. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for listening in to another episode. We appreciate every time we have a share, a download, and a listen. It means a lot to us, so thank you. How many times have you heard, follow your heart, or follow your dreams? Well, let me introduce you to Paige Zen. Paige was stuck in her dream job. She was a pilot. She was working for state government, had a good government job. Then she realized that job was no longer her dream. So she set out to make some changes. And that's not easy. To make that pivot in life, that's a pretty hard thing to do. But she did it. And now Paige is a business coach, helping out other creative visionaries follow their own passions. Again, it's a tough thing to do. But as you'll hear her say, having the mentors and the people in place to help is a big deal. But wait, there's so much more. There's so much more to who Paige is. Has to be one of the busiest people that I've met. Paige is also a festival organizer and the creator of some incredible events. Events like PlayThink, the Kentucky Yoga Festival, the Goddexx Initiative, and the Kentucky Mushroom Festival. She has crafted the vision for what each of those events need to be and is making them happen. So listen in as we learn Paige's story of her continuing connecting to community. And hopefully you'll find the inspiration to follow your heart as well. Be sure to check out our show sponsors. They keep us going. Thank you again for all the shares, downloads, and listens. Enjoy the show. And we'll have another one for you soon. All right. Well, thanks for being here. I'm glad to have you here.
Grateful to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. We had a little bit of scheduling stuff. I mean, you're a busy lady, so getting some time with you is pretty exciting for us.
Thank you. Yeah, I stay busy.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. And that's okay. I don't know what I was going to say with it, but we're busy too, but it's hard to find time. So anyway, I just sharing that. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
So you just went to Roswell is what we exchanged in the emails.
I did.
Yeah. Did you sneak in the base or anything? Did you see anything cool?
I did not sneak in the base. I have a friend that lives there. And so we went and visited and we did all of the super touristy things. Really was just there as a tourist, which is rare for me.
Yeah.
And we visited UFO museums.
Yeah.
And they have something called Spacewalk, which is similar to a haunted house, only alien themed.
Yeah.
Which was awesome. It was a fantastic tourist-filled time.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Miniatures museum.
Oh, yeah?
We went to a planetarium where they showed me about the birth of the world.
In Roswell?
In Roswell. It was a great, interesting time.
Of course, I've never been, but I've watched some videos, of course, not just the alien videos, but on town itself, and some of the museums that they have and all the different alien, what would you call it, regalia? Paraphernalia? I don't know what you would... How you would term that? All the above, yeah.
I'm a really nitpicky person sometimes, and I actually was upset at their lack of alien focus. I was like, can you guys get a little bit more touristy? Like, there was no restaurants that were alien themed, and a lot of their main street, there was a lot of alien stuff, but it wasn't still enough for me. I was like, do more, y'all. You need a tourist board that's more on top of it. But that's
kind of surprising.
Yeah, I was surprised.
I don't necessarily want to do the restaurant business, much less in New Mexico, but it does seem like they're missing an opportunity by not having saucers and all the different stuff you could do with that.
That's how I felt about it.
Yeah.
I also don't want to move to Roswell, but yeah. I saw an opportunity.
There is an opportunity there. There's a gap in the market in Roswell. How about that? Yeah. Well, interesting. Yeah. So no, did you go see the base or anything like that?
I didn't. It was never even brought up. My friend that's lived there for 3 years, and he seemed to think that it wasn't really something that you could go and do and be, and so I didn't even focus on it.
Yeah, I get the impression you just drive out in the middle of the desert and there's a fence.
That didn't seem necessary for me and a 9-year-old.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you either have to cross the line to make it interesting, or you just drove all that way to see a fence in the middle of the desert.
Nah.
Yeah, exactly.
I can turn on a YouTube video.
That's exactly right. Yeah. No interesting spy planes flew over, nothing.
Nothing. It was fairly boring, honestly.
Gosh, I know. I was so excited to hear about all the stuff you got into.
I didn't even see a UFO.
Oh, man.
Except for in a picture.
Yeah. Yeah. You believe in UFOs?
Absolutely.
Do you? I'm at a place where I think that, the universe is so big. Logic would tell me that it's impossible that we are the only forms of life that exist. So there has to be something else out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even if it's Earthlings in a future timeline or something, I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting too. We talked about at home that the world is just revolving. It seems like every day there's something that comes out on Twitter or the news that a civilization is uncovered, right? And it's this complex, beautiful architecture and structure that you think, man, people with modern machines would have a hard time creating that. So, how was it created hundreds or thousands of years ago?
I visit Mexico, Tulum, Mexico specifically, pretty often. I've been to Chichen Itza twice, the Tulum ruins, and seeing these ancient pyramids are just phenomenal. Like, I don't understand how these were ever built. And then you hear the stories, and I'm just like, could men at that point in time, without modern day machinery, actually make those? I'm not sure. Yeah.
So I've been into some of those, I don't know if the same ruins or not, but the Mexican ruins. Mm-hmm. They're fascinating, but when you're there, you're awe-inspired at looking at these things. And then when you get into the ideology of how was this created, the Aztecs or whomever, how was this created and how did they make that happen? And it sure makes you think, doesn't it?
And the amount of science and science-infused magic that was used to rule the people at that point in time to create those and to be okay with sacrificing themselves.
Yeah.
It's kind of wild.
I think it's funny to see modern mankind's interpretation of the technology that they had. It's like this pure speculation that they're using round trees and planks to roll these things or whatever. And it's like, I don't know that that's the case or not. I mean, that's just our interpretation of how they did it.
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? But it's fascinating to think about.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll see some UFOs before long.
I mean, based on the current United States new ideologies on UFOs and how they're releasing different documents, I'd say that's accurate.
Have you ever seen one at all? Anything that you would lump into that?
Occasionally I've seen things that I'm like, that might be a UFO, but not definitive enough for me to be positive about it.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah. I mean, technically by the definition, right?
Yeah.
It meets the acronym.
Well, so an interesting other tidbit about me. So I have been a pilot, and so I have had considerable amount of time in the air, and I've definitely never seen a UFO while in the air. And I feel like it would be more definitive at that point. So I tend to listen to pilots' UFO stories more than others.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a bunch of reels out there with pilots talking about what they're observing, what they're seeing.
Yeah.
And it gives me the same sense, right? That there's some credibility to that as they're describing things that are happening, real time to them.
Yeah. Or people in the military that have had such in-depth time in the Air Force or in the air, but also in-depth time in training in different ways as far as their body and mind goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Good point. I think maybe somebody in Stacy's family may have seen something, way back when, but you're back to folklore at that point. And it's not to point a finger or say something, about anybody. It's just, did you or didn't you? Because we have this gap of belief. I've not seen anything, and I don't think my wife has either. Amanda, have you ever? No. We've seen a few things, and we get in the hot tub about every night, and
I do too.
Absolutely love sitting there at night, just watching satellites go over, and different things. The space station's pretty cool to watch.
It is.
Love that stuff, and it's one of our favorite things. And so we've seen a few things in the hot tub. So it could just be the drinks and the hot water, maybe. And I know the first time I saw Starlink go across the sky.
That was weird.
Yeah, I was like, you're like, there's nobody to tell. Right? I was like, oh my, look at that! It's a UFOs. It's happening. It's happening. Like Michael Scott from The Office. And then you try to put it out there, like, no, dumbass, that's Starlink going across the sky. Like, of course, I knew that. Thank you. But we have saw some other things, have seen some other things, but, nothing definitive. You just see these weird lights and they move in a different pattern of the sky and they come in, come out, and I always find a way to say, well, it's an airplane with its headlights and it's turning. So, you only see the lights for whatever, but yeah.
Yeah. You never know. And we are so enmeshed in our screens and different stories. And there's so much information, both false and otherwise, that you don't know what is and isn't happening. And the narrative's being controlled not controlled on purpose or maliciously by any means, but just because there's a certain number of people that are offering the information out to the public that we can't necessarily know what is being researched properly.
Yeah, properly is a good word there, isn't it? Yeah. I would go a step further for that and say we are being manipulated by a lot of the propaganda that's put out there.
Yes, but I wasn't going to go there just yet.
I'll open the door. I'll just leave it there. If you want to cross in, you can come on in. But and I think on all sides, that's not taking a side. Agreed. It's just saying it's everywhere. And sometimes I wonder about this, mass release of information. I don't watch the news. I can't stand that type of stuff, but I get everything off of Twitter, which is probably equally as bad. Other than trying to embrace the concept of free speech, and with free speech, you get the propaganda as well because they're able to do it there. So it's different, I guess, I don't know. I think I like it because I feel like it makes me critically think through a lot of the stuff that I'm reading. I think I'm getting to the point of maybe this ability for us to get all this information. I think it's a good thing if we can manage it by thinking through what am I reading and, because then I get to a space of, is that true? Could that happen?
Which I think is amazing, but also are our brains meant or capable, having the capacity to actually think through that amount of information? Because 100 years ago, we didn't have this type or amount of information. And I'm not sure that we are able to process it all. I still kind of want to sit in the middle of the woods in my hot tub without a cell phone and not have to deal with the communities of, before we had villages of a couple hundred people. Yeah. And now we're dealing with thousands, millions of people and having to deal with their thoughts and ideas. And I don't know, kind of like simple life. Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point. Yeah. I don't know if we're capable of. We're not computers. Yeah, that's true. That's true. As humans, it is our natural instinct to manipulate the environment around us. Even as babies, we have to learn how to manipulate our adults in order to take care of us. And we're still continuing to do that as we get older in any way that we can in order to feel safe, not maliciously necessarily. But at some point, if you have a business or you have an organization, you have a passion that you want to protect, you're going to start manipulating anybody and anything around you in order to follow that passion. Yeah. And so naturally, we're going to be manipulated and coerced into things at the top levels because they have the more money and energy and influence to do that. And their passions are so big. Anyway, that went a whole tangent. Welcome. You stepped through very fine. It's one of my soapboxes. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of truth to it. I think about, like your son is here today. I think of where I'm at in life and, the reality of how much longer I'm on this earth, the amount of time that I'll have being as technologically competent, I guess, maybe. And that's a stretch some days. I don't know what that looks like. And so I get to the point of saying, well, for some reasons that my life has kind of gotten to that point where I don't know how much more I'll be able to do. And I'm not trying to put a negative spin. I'm trying to put myself into an age gap and then compare myself to, your son and my grandkids, grandson now, I have a granddaughter before long. We know what their life will look like. And
my daughter and son-in-law what their life will look like. And, quite differently, mine will look way different than my grandson's. I mean, he's come out of the womb basically with technology, and swiping is just a natural instinct. And so, one side, from the business side, I look at it to say, man, that's where everything's going to be. I mean, everything's going to be there before long.
I disagree.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that maybe some. So, it's just fascinating to me, right? To say,
yeah,
where it's come from to where it's going.
And I think there's going to be a massive aspect of technology, of course. I mean, no one can deny that.
Yeah.
But I see the lack of connection happening so much that day in day, you're in your home, you're at your work with almost no one else except for your coworkers and your kids. And even your kids, they're being sent to daycares and schools, education centers, and then to after school sports or whatever the case may be. And we are having little to no connection with anybody. In my life, the next step is connection. My business is connection. It's connecting people to themselves, connecting people to non-technology based education. It's connecting people to communities.
Yeah, good point. I was thinking, of course, that's what we're going to jump into, right? But I was sitting in my truck at a red light a couple of days ago, and I had just had the conversation with a good friend of mine, who knows what vehicle technology will look like in 4 or 5 years. And then it hit me. I was like, do you think technology is created to adapt human behavior, or do you think human behavior adapts to technology? Probably a little bit of both, I guess. But, what got me on that topic was I was sitting at a red light, and I do the same, so I'm not pointing a finger, but the lady sitting in the car beside me was deep in her phone, right, at the red light. And I thought, well, that's probably why driverless vehicles have been created. So are we creating that because humans are unable to adapt to technology or to the world? Or is technology actually modifying the behavior? I don't know. It's kind of interesting. So
I would think both.
So are you saying you think a disconnect will come, or you think there's going to be a more concentrated movement to get a disconnect?
I think there already is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's, as always, there's, alternative culture that's happening underground. And I think there's already a wide number of people in my age group and younger that are choosing not to be on social media at all, that are choosing to not give their children screens at all. And that it may be small, but it's still there and it exists. And I think that there are a lot of people that recognize exactly how much depression, anxiety, mental health illnesses are happening from that lack of connection, and that they're choosing to do something different.
We are so glad to have Ugly Tent as a sponsor to the show. My longtime friend Kenny Dietrich is a subject matter expert in modern survival, bushcrafting, and preparedness. As he challenges on the show, be prepared for the disaster most likely to happen to you. But let me tell you, Ugly Tent is so much more than just disaster preparedness. You need to check out the website at uglytent.com. That's UGLYTENT.com for a complete list of their products, their classes, and all the services that Kenny offers. There's a lot that I think you'll find interesting at uglytent.com. Again, just a neat place to go. So whether it's for camping, maybe it's a hike, maybe it's just trying to be in the outdoors for a little bit, uglytent.com is filled with the products and the services that you want. Not to mention, you have a true expert as a resource for you. Listen, while you're there, use the promo code JUDE, that's lowercase JUDE, and that code will get you 10% off your total purchase. That's a pretty good deal for some really cool stuff. Anyway, check out Kenny at uglytent.com. Yeah, good point. There needs to be, I think.
Absolutely.
I get my screen time, those alerts. Yeah. You reduced your phone time by 25%, right? Mm-hmm. And you were on there 8 hours a day. And I was like, 8 hours a day? My gosh, that's a third of my day.
You have a whole side job. Just looking at that screen.
Just looking at that screen.
Moving from a small screen to a medium screen to a big screen. Yep.
Yeah, I refuse to believe those numbers every day. Of course, I'm looking at my phone as I'm reading those numbers. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, well, there you go, buddy.
My son and I listen to a lot of audiobooks,
mm-hmm.
both inside and outside of the house. And so usually when I look at my phone and it's like, oh, you've listened or you've been on the phone for 20 hours today. I'm like, okay, but most of that was listening to a book, right? Yeah. I don't know how true that is, but I can hope. And 20 hours is definitely excessive and exaggeration.
Yeah. That doesn't leave a lot of time. It would have to be audiobooks. They're just playing, right?
Yeah, they're just playing in the background.
So is that when we're talking about this disconnect and you're talking about that community, is that what your coaching is about?
A lot of my coaching actually goes into starting businesses.
Yeah.
Is like learning people to get in tune with what their purpose in life is, how to feel into how they can help people with that, and then turning it into a business. I started my own business in 2012, so 13 years ago now. Yeah. And it took me a long time to realize that I just had a natural ability to tap into what was needed in that process. And I learned through my other events that I just love talking with people and showing or advising, guiding them into finding their own authentic spark in life and sharing that with people. Because I think, we find our medicine and then we give it away. Yeah. And when I say give it away, that doesn't mean you don't get paid for it, because you should. But give it away to, make sure.
I give a lot of that away too.
Well, and I think that is part of it.
Yeah. So what's that secret, right? I feel like everybody's chasing that live your dreams, live your passion thing. And if you do that, you'll never work a day in your life and all those things. But how do you convince somebody to do that?
I don't think you can convince them.
Yeah.
I think you have to lead a horse to water kind of thing. But really what it comes into is confidence. Is how many people have been in a household where they were put to daycare, put to the school system. And in the school system, we're not taught to look for us. We're taught to look out for the classroom as a whole. So if you were maybe more intelligent, more book smart than somebody else, well, you still can't go ahead of that. But if we are like, no, you're the most important person, you get to decide what you actually want. You get to make your own decisions. And we teach children, even at the age of, 2, 3, 4, 5, et cetera, that they can trust themselves and trust their own brain and trust their own wants. Then all of a sudden they realize what they're actually good at. And then you also have adults in their community that are telling them what they're good at because they're mirroring what that is for them. So like, oh, you're really good at communication, or you should start a podcast,
right?
Or whatever the case may be. And they learn to trust themselves, and then they automatically can figure out what that passion is for themselves. And at that point, in my opinion, there is no other step forward. They can't help but do it.
Mm-hmm. And so your clients would include current professionals who are in a 9-to-5 or whatever? Sometimes,
yeah. Honestly, I wish I could give you a full picture of what that clientele looks like, but they are all over the place. Anything from teenagers to people in their 70s who are just looking for that something more in life and not really sure what it is or how to move forward.
How do you tell them about the adversity to risk, like being risk adverse to it, or how do you get somebody comfortable enough to say, you got to give up working for the man? The quality of life will come. How do you get us there?
It's a great question. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're have both for a minute.
Yeah.
I started, as I said, my first event in 2012. I worked for the Kentucky Department of Aviation until 2015. So for 3 years, and even then I watched children in my home for another 3 or 4 years. So I think it's okay to have both, to be I'm working on this while I have this stability in hand. I'm a single mom. I've been single, in that fashion for, my entire adult life. And so for me, it was not really an option to just give it all up because I wouldn't have been able to pay for a place to live or food.
Right.
My dad is in his mid-60s and tells me this all the time, how much harder I have it. So he also is self-employed at this time. He's a historian. He's an author. He's a really amazing human. But when he was younger, he was like, if your mom had not been a nurse, if she hadn't been working and bringing in a stable paycheck, I would have never been able to do what I'm doing. I have 4 siblings. So there was, a big house with lots of kids. And he was like, if it hadn't been for that stable force, then I would have not been able to do what I'm doing. So a lot of people don't have the privilege to fully focus on what their passions are.
That's a great explanation for it. I'll share quickly our story, right? And so, we've both been employed by the man forever. My wife's now a retired nurse. Mm-hmm. I'm retired from law enforcement, from the government. So I worked for Kentucky also for a whole career. I knew I wanted to retire, but I got to a place where I could retire. And then took a couple small jobs in the private sector and got to a place where I was not going to be successful at the last place I was at. Never been there before. So it was a weird experience for me. And I'm still weirded out by it. But, I guess I'll carry that forever, supposedly. But
it's a good lesson, I guess.
It is a huge lesson. But at any rate, my company had been around for a while because I'd always taught. And so I thought, well, that was one of my goals was to try to work for myself. So, let's have a go at it because my risk wouldn't be low. Right. Mm-hmm. But if I wouldn't have had my pension, I would have been shut down within several months because how do you get ahead enough in order to, manage the risk of it? Fortunately for us now we're still running wide open now 5 years later with it. Yeah, it's awesome. But I still feel like I'm chasing it and I always will. But, I think about that and we talk about all the time too, that, I and we are probably ready for some other type of small pivot. Mm-hmm. So I'm talking in support of what you just said because I was able to manage my risk, but I'm at a point now of saying, I don't know how I can pivot that much. So I have a lot of fear and that fear creates this big barrier. Yeah. Any guidance there that you would throw at me, Coach?
Call on support. Call on mentors that that have already done it ahead of you. Look for the people that have already paved the path. Yours can always be different. Yeah. But you still were like, oh, this person's already done this. They've already done something similar. Why recreate the wheel? And then also find community. I come back to community every single time. Yeah. If we lived in villages, if we lived in community that we're like, yes, you can do this. Yes, I'm going to give you support. Yes, I'm going to watch your kid or help you with the bills or, whatever needs you need. Right. Then it's not as much risk.
So you're thinking about hiring a private investigator, huh? Think knowledge, experience, and trust. Think DPJ Consulting. Listen, we're the folks you want on your team. Whether it's a criminal matter, corporate, or administrative issue, or maybe something more personal, you need to make the right choice for you. Our house of expertise at DPJ Consulting can help you with investigations, and that can mean a whole lot of different things. Pre-employment background checks, personal VIP security, and so much more. Check us out at dpjconsulting.com. Follow us on all of our social media platforms or give us a call at 855-TEAM-DPJ. That's 855-TEAM-DPJ. Give us a call. It costs nothing to talk. It costs you everything if we don't. That's been one good thing of the show that we've had. We've had a lot of small business, a lot of entrepreneurs. I don't know how to word it, but just people that are making it work. And for me, I can look back. It's like, wow, that person's kicking ass, and they're doing great things. I would have never have guessed that they're able to do it, but they're able to carve out their own space in the world.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
You're going to find your way. If it's that important to you, regardless of the risk, regardless of whatever else, you will find a way. Yeah. And I think at that point you dig into your why.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty heavy advice. So you got the horse to the water. It's just making them drink now. Yeah. Yeah.
And because I strongly believe that anybody and everybody can do whatever they want, but they have to be willing to pay the price. and the price isn't usually as heavy as you think it is.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if that's true.
I don't think those of us on this side, let me be on the side of not making the pivot.
Yeah.
You don't know if the grass on the other side is greener.
Yes.
And so you're afraid to go to the other side of the fence. But those that do will tell you the grass is a whole lot greener and better tasting and richer and better for you and all those things. Yeah. But it's still that's a hard leap to get over there.
Hard leap. Fear.
Yeah.
How do you get over that fear?
Yeah.
With a whole lot of help.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. Yeah, that's true. Do you ever keep up with your clients? I mean, how many people actually take the leap and do they stay successful?
It depends on how you define success.
Yeah, that's my next question. How do you define success?
Doing what you want and loving the way you do it.
Yeah, interesting.
Which I realize is different. I think every person gets to define their own success, but in my mind, it's like I'm doing exactly what I want. I'm living my days the way that I please, and I'm enjoying who I am as I'm doing those things. Now, financial abundance, material abundance are amazing in that process too, but it's not the end all, because for me, having the freedom to be home with my son, having the freedom to go and travel is so much more important than those financial needs. Or not needs, financial abundance.
Yeah.
Some people find that their success is simply getting out of their 9 to 5, regardless of whether they're making money or not. Sometimes success is just having better relationships. So it depends on what that person is going after. As far as my clients, I would think that all of them are better off, regardless of what that means. I know some people, I've coached them for a year to do like a specific event, a specific business. And then a week before they've been like, I'm canceling this. I'm not doing it. But now they're living a different existence that they're happier in. So I just don't think you ever know.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
And the idea is to be like a baseball coach. You know, you don't know, your entire team may fail in quotations,
right,
the entire season. But if they're a better person at the end of the day, did they really fail? Right. If they have a great time and they learn more about themselves and learn more about their teammates, then my mind is still a success. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I struggle with my own definition of it. And to your point, I think it's probably an evolving definition for me.
That's the hope.
That's the hope. Yeah.
Because if we're all evolving, we're all changing who we are and having massive growth inside, then that definition is going to change every day. Yeah.
I used to think of it in financial terms. Yeah. I want $79 billion quadrillion dollars.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but that's what I wanted. And I've gotten to a point where I don't really measure my success that way. I think of it as, is the business working? Yeah. We've got business. We've got people that work for us. So whatever you're doing is working. My wife is now retired. She's a stay-at-home. Now, with our grandson and now granddaughter coming. And so you think, that's pretty significant. That's, this entrepreneurship. And I always say, if you ain't hustling, you ain't eating. And that's the truth. And I question it, am I doing what's right? Am I making it? Am I? And then you come back to those things and say, hey man, put that back in a different perspective and look at the things that you're doing and who you're doing them with and what it means to them. And
so we're coming back to people and coming back to community.
Yeah. Do you think that small towns satisfy the community? And the point I'm trying to get at is, it seems like small towns put a real push on, shop local, support local. Some of my experiences have not been that way. They say they talk a mean game, but they don't actually back up the game at all.
I think I need a more specific question.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you answered it. You answered it just fine.
I grew up in a small town. I grew up in Jamestown, Kentucky on Lake Cumberland.
Uh-huh.
And I now live in a small town. I live in Milton, Kentucky, which is incredibly small. I actually know almost nobody in my small county. Prior to that, I lived in Madison, Indiana, also a small community. Mm-hmm. And within 5 minutes of each other. One's on one side of the bridge, one's on the other. And both
are beautiful places.
They're both absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. I'm thankful every single day that I drive to and from town. It's just the most beautiful view, and I get to go across the river. And But the people that I've met, I moved in Madison about 3 years ago and immediately was a staple to the community based on who I met. And I mean, I went to a party that I was invited to. Literally everybody there was like, oh, I heard you moved into this house. Your name is this. You used to work this. You have this kid. And I was like, I don't even know who you are. What do you, I don't understand what's happening right here.
Right.
And they're the most supportive people I've ever met. I mean, they will follow every time I make a post that's about a business on social media. 100 people that have just met me in the last 3 years are more supportive of me than anybody that I met while I lived in Lexington for 15 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's big. And I think it is the community support. And so I think that they really do mean it when they say shop local. And what they really mean is I want to support my neighbor.
Yeah.
And sometimes that shop local is not their neighbor and then it's different.
Yeah.
So they want that personal connection.
Yeah. The personal connection, it seems like everything is shifting back to that. Seems like for a little while the world, not we, but the world itself went into not so much the personal connection, but there does seem to be that.
I think it's a pendulum swing.
A pendulum. I was trying to think of the right way to say it. The pendulum is swinging back to this personal connection. And before we started this, we were talking about personal branding, right? So,
and I think that's kind of our rebelliousness towards social media and the disconnect that's happened through technology. And now we're coming back to, no, I want, even if I'm using technology, I want a face-to-face.
There seems to be the current generation, whatever that is, the young kids.
What age are we talking? Like
I don't
20s?
know. Yeah, let's do that. They're changing the workforce. They're changing the office, the way an office looks.
Absolutely.
The way that work is done. Home buying, renting, leasing, purchasing, all those things. You know, there seems to be a dramatic shift happening.
There is.
Where they're wanting to travel and see the world and spend their money differently than what maybe my age group had done, or what my parents, all of our parents have said and done. You know, save.
The roots aren't the same.
Yeah.
We as a people, as a race, I guess, as human race specifically, don't have roots. We don't have those. Some people do in the small towns and communities.
Right.
But we used to live near our children, our grandchildren, our grandparents. And today, I mean, my son and I live in this community. It's just the two of us. I don't have a lot of familial support. There's no reason for me to stay and have a house in one place because I don't have the support or the roots that somebody else has in the past. To whereas, you know, someone that's in their 60s or 70s, they lived in a space, a farm, even a city that had, you know, probably 4, 5, 6 generations at any given time. They probably had land that belonged to their parents, furniture that belonged to their parents or past generations, ancestors. And that stuff just doesn't exist anymore for whatever reason. And I'm not sure exactly what that reason is yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we kind of mirror that, you know, we live very close to my mom and dad, and then my daughter and family live literally next door to us. And so we're kind of there. It is nice. It's very nice for a lot of good reasons. But also to what we were saying is even for mom and dad, you know, for a long time, we say dad loves cowboys and Westerns. And I think that's all he still watches. Right. And we said, listen, you know, you're young enough. Go see the West. Go drive. You know, who cares? Time is time, and they have the money and the time. Go see it. And they never would. They were like, nope, I'm going to stay close to, you know, to Rachel's my daughter. You know, she may need us.
Yeah.
We'll make it. We'll be okay. You know, go see those things. And so I felt like I just preached, right? And I did the same to my daughter. She's growing up. Go see the world. You're young. Go see things. You know, there's a big world. And she took a different path to start a family and stay close to home. And so now I'm eating my own words, right? Because we're saying, let's go see the world. Like, no, let's just stay home because they may need us. It's like, you know, they're going to be just fine. No, they may need us. So let's stay home.
I think there's a balance. But I know for me and myself and a lot of people, my peers, it's like I'm frequently looking for roots. Like I have moved 3 times in the last 3 years after I moved from Lexington in 2000, whatever year that was, 2020 maybe. And I have yet to find the same amount of family or community that has wanted me to have roots somewhere. And I know that I've had lots of other people say the same way. And some of it's money because, you know, people are wanting, they aren't able to buy the homes because things have increased and the money in a job has not increased. And so they're having to have roommates. And then roommates just aren't the same thing as family.
Right.
I love my friends, but it's not the same thing as like, oh, I want to call my dad or I want to call my sister.
Yeah. 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 Good point. All right. Let's move into some of the things that you have going on. I want to leave us some time on the back end to talk about a few things. So as I was looking at you and trying to figure out what all you're part of, and let's just talk about, I think the festivals may be a good place to start.
Yeah.
And I may not know all the stuff with it, but so I've planned a few conferences and I've planned a few events, I guess. But I have a lot of respect for you. Not only are you planning a festival, there's 4, I think, that you have going on?
Yes, I think that's true.
And not just
sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, we're talking about the 4 different festivals.
Yeah. So
and like they're staggered like pretty quick. They're pretty
very quick. Yeah, I'm a glutton for punishment. And so once upon a time, I, as an early 20-year-old, I'm in college and I started going to festivals such as Bonnaroo, which I know is a bigger name at this point, but Bonnaroo was brand new at that point in time.
Right.
And I saw somebody hula hooping. And I was like, well, that looks fun, And I was like, I want a hula hoop. And so I got a hula hoop and it was...
We should have had that here today.
It'd be a great demonstration. And so I started hula hooping and I got fairly good at it. But at that point in time, the internet was not as big as it is today.
Right.
And I couldn't find a bunch of YouTube videos. I did find a way to make my own hula hoop. And so I did that. And I was living in Richmond, Kentucky. At that point in time, I was doing my undergraduate degree at EKU. And then I moved to Lexington and I met somebody that was hula hooping with fire. And so they taught me that. And I wanted to learn more and more and more. And so I was looking in the region for hula hoop artists and exhausted that at some point. And so I was like, okay, well, I want to start a festival where I can bring instructors to me so I can learn more. And I had a friend who owned a farm, was like, hey, do that here.
Great.
And so PlayThink was born.
Yeah.
And PlayThink to me is a play on the words of flow, which is built on by Miles. I can not pronounce his last name, but he's the father of flow. And will tell you that it's kind of the peak between challenge and relaxation. So kind of like you're challenged to do this thing, but then you've become an expert enough that it flows. And you can reach the state of flow doing almost anything. So if you're in marching band and you're marching a show between a show, you almost do the entire thing without thinking about it. Or if you're doing the dishes and all of a sudden the sink is empty, it's because you're in the flow of doing whatever you're doing. And so PlayThink was my version of the word flow. And we brought in that first year 60 instructors on a wide variety of flow arts, including hula hooping. And it grew from there. The next year we had 350 people, and now this year is its year 13.
Wow.
And I had no idea what it would become. I didn't know what I wanted. I just wanted to learn how to hula hoop better. I was 25 at the time. I had
small visions, right?
And, at 25, I was like, oh, I can have this festival and I can take all the classes. Well, I quickly realized that when you put on something, you don't actually get to partake in the classes.
Right.
Yeah. Learned that one real quick. And I fell in love with it. And it was it was such a labor of love. Every single year I was stressed to the max. And I was like, I can never do this again. This is miserable. I'm losing money. Why would I do this? And then I would fall in love with it every single time. Because afterwards people would come up to me and be like, this event changed my life, which I laughed at for years.
Right.
It took me several years to realize what people meant by that. But when you realize that you're changing the trajectory of people's lives or changing their level of confidence in themselves, and that's literally sparking the whole rest of their life in front of them, not to mention their children, you're like, oh, I need to take this seriously. And, because of my immersement, that's not a word. Immersion. Yeah. Immersion.
We'll go with immersement. Listen, I'm going to make up a lot of words here in the next hour or so.
Immersion in the movement arts and realizing what confidence that could bring to people. Because sometimes that's the first time that they're feeling right mentally or emotionally in their heads, or that's the first time that they're feeling confident in their bodies because they're feeling that they have power over themselves. I got into yoga, and I got my yoga teacher training, and I was like, oh, so many people are coming to PlayThink to not only do flow arts classes, but also doing yoga classes. So then I started the Kentucky Yoga Festival. And it just like every single time I found that I personally needed new medicine or something new in my life, I looked for other people, experts, to come in and start something so I could learn more. I wanted to learn how to hula hoop more. PlayThink came. I wanted to learn more about yoga. The Kentucky Yoga Festival came. I went through a relationship that had a lot of domestic violence in it. And so afterwards I had to learn more about trusting myself. And then I started something called the Goddexx Initiative. And so it was a lot about feminine divinity and learning the strength and power of women and how we create our own lives. So once again, something else that I needed my own medicine. And then in the same process of that domestic violence relationship, I ended up with an injury that caused a traumatic brain injury where I had massive amounts of depression and anxiety and didn't really know how to move forward in my life. And I got really involved in the medical benefits of mushrooms, of lion's mane, psilocybin, and various other things. And then I started the Kentucky Mushroom Festival as well this last year. And so genuinely every time that I needed something else in my life, I created it in order to bring it to me.
Why not keep it under one tent? Why not keep it under one initiative?
It's a great question, and one that's been asked to me over and over again.
No doubt, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer other than they don't feel the same.
Well, I think that is the answer, right? I mean, and on one part of it, you can say, well, you just grow it, and the bigger it comes, maybe the more it attracts and get people in there. But at the same time, it feels like you're keeping a topic or something. You're making it more specific to the needs.
Mm-hmm. Each event does bring a different demographic of people, and so that's part of it. But also, it almost feels like, PlayThink was I was not a teenager at the time, but I'm going to use this analogy. PlayThink was almost as if I was a teenager. And then as I got older, there are different renditions of who I am and what kind of education I needed for each one. So it's just such a different phase for each person that I don't know that one event could do it all. I feel it's more expansive than that, and that it doesn't allow us to get as far in the niche as we possibly could in one. Yeah,
that makes sense. When it gets of a certain size, you lose the intimacy and
exactly.
I don't want to say the purpose, but that drive seems to be watered down or, moved over.
And each event has had its own value system and mission statement. So PlayThink is very family centric and sober, which is weird to have a festival that's sober.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really coincide with something like the Kentucky Mushroom Festival, which is about all types of mushrooms, but also dives deep into the research of nootropics and psychedelics. And that doesn't feel like it would do very well in a family-centered, sober environment.
Yeah, good point.
Good point. Yeah. And I've had a lot of people throw shade, for lack of a better word, that I'm involved in both of those. Like, how can a person be in charge of this thing that's sober and be in charge of this thing that is decidingly not sober, depending on who you talk to?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess each person has their own right to question and to think those things. But to me, that's pretty easy. I've got multiple interests, and
we're all multifaceted people.
Yeah, multiple missions to each of these things, and trying to create something different, special for everybody. So
exactly.
So PlayThink, that's coming up in June of this year.
Yeah.
And you're having it in Harrodsburg?
It is.
How are you finding these locations? You don't have to give away your secret sauce. I mean, but you're spread out a little bit is what I'm getting to.
So PlayThink specifically was in Berea, Kentucky at a place called Homegrown Hideaways for the first 7 years. And some friends of mine own that farm. They still are active as an Airbnb farm with beautiful glamp sites. They're just amazing humans. But we grew out of it. And it got to be a logistical nightmare trying to pack everybody in this little farm. And so I was looking for a location for a couple of years, and Terrapin Hill Farm in Harrodsburg already produced multiple events. And so I was aware that they existed. And I kind of just threw it by the owners, thinking that they would turn me down.
Yeah.
And they said yes. And so it kind of just fell in my lap. And then the other event location that I use is called Barren River Magic in Center, Kentucky. And that place hosts the Yoga Festival, Kentucky Mushroom Festival, and the Goddexx Initiative. And the man that owns that is named Tootie Irwin. And he was a friend of a friend And our friend brought him to PlayThink, and he's in his 70s. He's an amazing, just straight visionary, great genius. And he was like, I really want PlayThink at my farm. And I was like, PlayThink's not fitting on your farm. It's way too small. Center is a very hilly place, about 40 minutes from Cave City. And so he continued for a couple of years. He's like, I really just tried to woo me into having an event at his place.
How cool.
That's one of the reasons the Kentucky Yoga Festival came about, was also because he wanted me to have an event at his place. He's now turned into one of my most favorite people in my life. He's a mentor to me in so many different ways. And so that's really my two places. They found me. I didn't have to search hard.
Yeah. So how big has PlayThink grown to?
We had 2,500 people last year, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah.
How about that?
30% are children under the age of 18, which I think is massive. I don't know of any other festival in the world that has kids the way that we do.
So it's what is that, 5 days? 12, 13,
It starts
14,
on Wednesday.
Yeah.
We let people in Wednesday evening to where they can set up camp and get ready. And then we start full force on Thursday morning. And they have a full Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Just different activities, different things.
We have over 250 workshops. I call them play shops.
Yeah.
On movement and music and dance and self-development and relationships, just a wide variety of things.
So I was going through, the things on the website that we're looking at here, and I have to be honest, I didn't understand it.
It's hard to understand, honestly.
Yeah. Talking to you, it's crystal clear, right? But not knowing what the event is, I'm like, what am I looking at, and what is this? And the different instructors that you had coming in, I was like, these aren't people that you just found, at Walmart next door. I mean, you're bringing people. Well, that's kind of how this show was based, right? That you could be standing next to a world-class person at Walmart. So
you would never know.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. That's why. That's really how this thing was born, right? Is conversations with exceptional people. But, I started noticing, I was like, well, these are highly skilled, highly, professional people coming in to offer, play shops, I guess, with it. I think it's fascinating. I think that's, beyond impressive and awesome and cool and all those cool words that go with that, because that's not easy to do. And so did you just reach out to these guys like, hey,
so the first several
this is
years
me.
I did. And then as the event grew, I now do all application based. And so we put out applications, and we had over, I think it was 300 or 350 workshop applications. Obviously, we have to deny quite a few of those, but it's all application based. It actually is one of the hardest parts of the job, because there's a lot of times that my friends and family have applied that I've had to be like, I can only bring in so many people, and had to deny them. But yeah, no, now it's all application based, gratefully. And some of these people I've known for 15 years that have grown with the event. And when you say the word professional, it's true. I mean, everybody that's coming in is incredibly skilled and amazing at what they do, but sometimes it's only in the aspect of what they're teaching here.
Right.
And then they may work at Walmart in the other aspect. And people are so multifaceted, and our culture praises and uplifts only certain types of people.
Right.
And so if they're neurodivergent and they're not capable of holding down an office job that brings in a decent wage, but they're amazing at teaching and juggling, we get to see them all of a sudden in what they are and are not good at in a wider range of acceptance.
I think that's one of the things in my personal life is my biases are changing, hopefully removing or going away as I see people in different lights now, as I change careers and do different stuff. And, so you kind of get that, right? There's a human connection that we all have. There's human interest that we all have. And I did not appreciate that in my younger years. It was. Let's talk a minute about sex. Sex is part of life. It's beautiful, and it's essential to living a great life. Enter my friends at Shameless Care, who have created something cool for your personal health care. Shameless Care offers a variety of products you may be interested in. ED treatments, STI treatments, STD testing. So how does it work? Well, that's the easy part. You go to shamelesscare.com, you choose the product you're interested in, you complete an online questionnaire, which is reviewed by a medical doctor, by the way. Pay for the product, and in a couple of days, discreet packaging arrives right to your doorstep. Their customer service is second to none. They're always responsive, and they care. Listen, Ashley's the best. Tell her I said hello. They're a small business ran by people like you and me, and they're incredible. And the best part? We can save you some money. Click on the link in the show notes. Use the code JUDE at checkout. It's JUDE, and save $30 on your first purchase. That's not bad, huh? Visit our website to learn more, shamelesscare.com, and don't forget the promo code JUDE.
Every single human has this big, long life story.
Yeah.
And we don't know the ins and outs of it. We're so much alike and yet so different, because until you actually know at least the highlights of their story, you don't know how their brain works. Or you don't know. Yeah. And if you don't know how their brain works, then you don't know how their life works. They could have the most dysfunctional home and yet be the most amazing child caretaker. It just depends on what their strengths are and how they've been nourished.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about which one you want to do next, Yoga Festival or
whatever you please.
Yeah.
So in the timeline of things, in my timeline of things, PlayThink comes first because that was my first baby. But in the year, Yoga Festival actually comes first. It's
coming up pretty quick. That's in May.
Yep. Very soon. And so similar, that's funny. That should have been there. On our website, I have a website designer that focuses on everything. However, the same website designer updates all three of my websites, and I give them a lot of information at once right about this time with all of the instructors and schedules. And of course, as you can see, PlayThink has 90 instructors. And I think the Yoga Festival has 70-ish, somewhere between 60 and 90. And that's a lot of information. So the Yoga Festival also hosts 150 classes or so. We have about 30 different vendors. And it's all things yoga. Now, when you think yoga, most people think, oh, I'm going to put on my yoga pants, my stretchy pants, get my yoga mat out and do this like hatha flow. Hatha being more of a rigorous sun salutations kind of thing, which I realize I may not be speaking your language. And,
it's the look on my face. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And, for here, like we have things as laughter yoga that literally the entire class is laughing. And sometimes it's forced laughter, but even if you force a smile or force laughter on your face, it automatically is improving your circulation, improving your body, and improving your mental state. And we talk into meditation, also some more self-development things, how we relate to other people, things of that nature.
Yeah. So all of these events, are they, do you commute to them, or are you on site the whole time? How does that work?
I get on site a couple days pre-event, set it up, and then usually stay a day or two after the event, and I'm there the entire time. Yeah.
And then what about those who attend?
They show up day of. They usually camp on site, and some people don't. Some people are not campers.
Right.
But I really like the full immersive experience to where people, we don't have great cell phone service on these sites, which is on purpose.
Right.
So people can disconnect, and by that disconnection, we're capable of being more present with ourselves and the people around us.
Yeah. Barren River is a beautiful area of the state.
So gorgeous.
It's just a beautiful place. There's some really, I hate to use the word again, but it's just true. There's just some beautiful places. And that little section of central west Kentucky that this is nestled in is just to drive through it. You're like, man, this is just beautiful land.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. And the same for the Goddexx Initiative.
Yep. It's the same place.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's in July, and it's 3 years old, I think.
Yeah.
And we cap it at 100 people. So it's a very small, intimate gathering. It's hard. This is not the site for that, actually. There's not a website for it. There's a Facebook page.
So for those looking, it's Goddexx.
It is.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing for me.
Yeah.
Which I could dive deep in that whole controversial subject. I chose to keep in mind that every single human, male, female, or otherwise, have goddess or female energy. And if we're quote unquote doing things right, then we as humans have a balance of feminine, masculine energy in the way that we're doing things. Masculine energy being more task oriented, leadership oriented, female energy being more reception or being provided for. And so for me, this was a way for people to come in to learn about being that in more of their goddess or feminine side, which I think is open to all genders. Mm-hmm. And I wanted people to understand that it wasn't just for females. And so I put the XX on the end of that in order to convey that. However, a lot of people immediately assume then it is an event specifically for those that are transgender. And it's one of those things that I hate to explain because it can just go in so many different directions.
Yeah. Well, so the point being is for everybody.
It's for everybody.
Yeah, that's right. And do you have a mix? Do you
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's heavily female.
Right.
Like 75%.
Oh.
But there's quite a few men.
I expected more.
Yeah. No, quite a few men that come. And it is, being a female, there are a lot of times that it's when something's heavily female and men show up, you're very worried that the men are there for the wrong reason. And I've actually found that that's not happened here. And it's really beautiful that the men that are showing up are actually wanting to learn about their own feminine divinity or the females in their life and how better to support them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. It's cool that the vision that you set forth is what's playing out.
It is.
Yeah.
It makes me so happy.
As it should. All right. And then the Mushroom Festival. Mm-hmm. So that's coming up too.
It is. It's in October. Very beginning of October, the 4th through the 6th. It is, last year was the first year, immediately a success. It was 350 people from the get-go. And it was a completely different demographic than has ever shown up at any of my other events. I did not know what to expect. I am new to the mushroom world, but there is a wide, massive community of mycologists and mushroom enthusiasts across the nation. Mm-hmm. And the education of that right now, which I think we're also going through a psychedelic resurgence, is big, and people are thirsty for the knowledge. Yeah,
I would say the craving, the knowledge. Yeah. There's a lot of that out there. So last year was the first year. Mm-hmm. What brought on the idea of having the Kentucky Mushroom? I don't think Kentucky's ever had anything like that.
Well, so there is the Irvin Mountain Mushroom Festival in Irvin in, I don't know what month it is, honestly. I've never been. It's massive. I think it's on its 50th year. And it's kind of specifically to celebrate morels, from my understanding. But it's a free event. It's almost like a street vendor fair. I don't feel like they have the education. And for me, I specifically wanted education. Mm-hmm. Education and community. Because community is always the vein that I come back to.
I've heard that.
So I know I touched on domestic violence a little while ago. And so my son's father and I had a domestic violence situation where I had a traumatic brain injury. I also have fibromyalgia that was diagnosed when I was in my early 20s. And so it immediately flared up my fibromyalgia to a degree that I was really not functioning in life anymore, mentally, emotionally, or physically. I was having massive chronic pain. I had brain fog so bad that I could hardly create a sentence. At some point, I forgot my phone password. I could not log into my phone for a whole week, even though it was a password I'd used for 2 years.
Right.
And just crying, genuinely not functional. And I was prescribed different medications, and I was always very afraid to take them because of the negative neurological effects of specifically of Cymbalta, a drug that's for fibromyalgia patients that affect the brain. And so I found lion's mane mushroom specifically. And lion's mane helped me a little bit at a time. And then through lion's mane, I started working through some other medicinal mushrooms. And then I came across Paul Stamets. Paul Stamets is kind of known as maybe the current father of mycology today. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I know his name.
Yeah. So he had part to do with the newest mushroom documentary on Netflix that I cannot remember the name of right now.
Yeah, I think that's where I've seen, as I'm scrolling through, I've seen that come across our feed.
And I got to meet him at Burning Man. I totally fangirled and learned about something called the Stamets Stack. And the Stamets Stack is mostly about microdosing. And so you microdose lion's mane with niacin, which is a flush niacin, along with some very, very small amounts of of psilocybin mushrooms. And immediately I was like, I don't want to take mushrooms. That's not something I'm interested in. I have been a fairly prudish, straight edge person the majority of my life. And I've not really had, interest in taking drugs. And so to me, I was like, no, this is going to affect my brain and it's negative. But I heard so much good about it that I, for 1 week, was like, I'm going to explore microdosing psilocybin mushrooms along with the Stammet stack. And I did. And for that entire week, I had oral migraines that were so bad that I didn't know if I would be able to get out of bed. And after, it felt like my entire brain was rearranging itself. And after that week, I still have a lot of work to do in my brain, but all of a sudden, everything was better. That was 3 years ago-ish. And I just continued on my research and education on how that was helping me. And I microdosed 4 to 5 days a week for over a year at that point. And now I feel like I have minimal anxiety, almost zero depression. I'm capable of being functional in my workplace. I have yet to trip because I've never taken enough to have that tripping or hallucinogenic effect. It's just enough for me to be like, the world's a little bit brighter. I can actually function. I can think for the first time since this traumatic brain injury. And it changed my life. And I wanted to show other people that you can be a good person and still take a microdose of mushrooms to heal your brain.
Yeah. I'm very interested in that. So I'm behind you in my research, right? But I'm starting down that path of saying, there's a different world out there than I'm used to. And then keep in mind, as I said earlier, my wife's a retired nurse from the medical field. And so like many others, it's been the same path, right? You have a problem, you go see the doctor, you get prescribed something and it works or it doesn't work or whatever happens out of it. And then, just through a couple of experiences that we've had at home, we've just said, I don't know about all this, we can even tie in our propaganda conversation we had at the beginning of this. There's so much misinformation and stuff that's coming from government, big pharma, the world, all those places. And so, for us, we started saying there's got to be some other stuff that's more natural, comes from the earth, before a law was created.
That have been used for thousands and thousands of years.
That's what I was going to say. Before a law was created, it was used legally and effectively. And it's just only because in our small blip of life on this earth, we've just encountered a time that it's deemed illegal. Yep. Doesn't mean it's ineffective. And so, we've not done anything but other than just to look at, all right, let's make informed decisions. Let's see what we can do. We learned about the Mushroom Festival just after completion of it last year. So we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't hear about this, but we plan to come out this year because, for the education piece, we want to talk to people and see what it's about. For us, I look at it as, this stress and anxiety. So, being an entrepreneur and running a business and then having people depend on you and all those things, right? That creates this amount of stress that you just carry. Yep. And it's hard to manage that. I don't want to turn to drinking or whatever else. I just don't. And so I'm always looking for how am I going to figure out how to manage that? And I don't have those answers yet, but that's part of it, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
I found something here today that was talking about Kentucky, that 43% of state residents report symptoms of anxiety and depression. Yep. And this is, I think it's 2021 is what the article says. Here we go. From psychedelicpassage.com, there was the article's psilocybin and psychedelic assisted therapy in Kentucky by Erica Perez. Pretty good little article, pretty good little white paper. It just talks about anxiety and depression, and I don't want to go down the path of why is that, but it's here. Yep. And I think a lot of people are looking for how do you manage that and how do you measure that? Because you don't always want to go to a doctor and be labeled as such.
And a lot of people would lose their jobs if they were open about it.
That's correct. There's a lot of liberties that we have as citizens here that you start putting too many labels from the doctor on, you lose those liberties and those things that bring you happiness. the way you live your life. And so I think maybe not so much for us, or maybe it is, but I think as a whole, that creeps into the conversation of people are looking for solutions. They want to reconnect. They want to get back to nature and all those pieces. But they're not sure how to do it. Yeah. So yeah, this is exciting to see.
Are you familiar with the Sanctuary Mushroom, Sacred Mushroom Church in Louisville?
Well, only because you mentioned it in the email.
Okay.
And so for us, we wanted to have you as a guest first, and then we'll reach out to them pretty soon. But go ahead.
The person that founded that, and Sanctuary is spelt with a P on the beginning,
of course,
which I think is adorable. The man that started that, his name is Eric Osborne, and his wife Courtney. And they've actually been facilitating psilocybin retreats and education for like the last 20 years. They were arrested at some point. They're very open about their story, and it has just, gone through a path that I can't even fathom. And I learned about them when I started the Kentucky Mushroom Festival, and they reached out and wanted to be part. And I feel like I've learned more about psychedelic and psilocybin mushrooms from them than I have from anything else.
Yeah.
It's been scary being open about that. I'm a single mom with a kid. I don't really want people to judge me based on what I'm using for my mental health, and at the same time wanting to share the story.
Right.
Can I be viewed as a successful professional human that's not hurting or putting harm to myself and my child at the same time? And I do want to note that after using psilocybin for about 2 years, I've not used it in over a year and still have not went back to anxiety and depression, which I think speaks a lot, because there are people that are on antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds for their entire life, and as soon as they're off of it, it's back. I genuinely feel like we're changing the neural pathways in our brain in order to be able to function better.
Yeah. Back to that big pharma piece, right? And the synthetic drugs, and the dark side of those, but back to that propaganda and paraphernalia that we've been taught that we don't talk about those things. And on the commercials, they speed through 500 side effects, faster than an ear can process it. And they do that for a reason.
I found that there was a large number of veterans that were coming to the Mushroom Festival that were basically saying that psychedelics changed their entire life and removed their PTSD symptoms. And it was the only reason they could be functioning today. And that was such a big piece to me, particularly because I know that as veterans, they were worried about being ostracized as people that were using illegal drugs.
There's still a huge, I'll use the word again, bias. There's a big argument for cannabis and marijuana having its I'll call it healing properties. That's probably not the right term for it, but let's call it that because I can't think of anything else. And then mushrooms are in that same conversation that there's a medicinal purpose is probably the way to say it. Not to mention the risk that, let's say those same veterans wanted to smoke. They either have to go somewhere else or they have to buy a product on the black market. And that's scary enough as it is, because you don't know what you're getting, especially in today's world, right? That's in the news every day, that fentanyl and all the other deaths that go with the stuff. So there's just some scary stuff about it. And I still think society has, unfortunately, a big bias on some of those things. And
I strongly believe that marijuana and mushrooms and any other type of natural drug that's being used medicinally can also be abused, and is regularly, probably more so than being used in therapeutic approaches. And so that education piece is, in my opinion, one of the most important. And I know that I've read up on other psychedelic therapies coming to light, particularly in Kentucky, specifically MDMA and ketamine. I'm sure that there are others that I'm not aware of, and seeing how there are now ketamine treatment in Kentucky. I think MDMA is on the docket to maybe be approved in the next 6 months to a year based on some therapist friends of mine. And so I'm seeing that people are using those to good things. They can also be abused, greatly abused, and people can die from them. And why aren't we educating people on the difference in the same way that we have alcohol?
Yeah.
Not that people have actually been educated about alcohol, but maybe should be.
Well, it seems maybe these topics are ripe for lobbyists, and the other big machine that we may argue against, but that's probably the answer, is they've spent the money to to get their purpose put up.
And why?
Yeah.
And come back to that money piece.
Yeah, come back to that money piece.
Because is there long-term financial abundance in being like, oh, you can take these mushrooms that you can literally grow in your basement for 2 years and then be completely healed and not have to take anything again? Or is there more money in taking this antidepressant every single day for the rest of your life that you have to buy from us?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And the addictive qualities of each of those.
And then, or even there's a lot of antidepressants and psychotics, anti-anxiety medications that if you take yourself off of them immediately, it will kill you.
Yeah, sure. Certainly. That's right. Did you have any pushback with the Mushroom Festival? It seems like that would create a lot of maybe not positive attention.
So I personally got some negative attention because as I mentioned before, there were a group of people that were really angry that I was putting on something with psychedelic education as well as putting on PlayThink that was a sober event because they didn't see one and the same. My dad was very concerned for me.
Yeah.
He was like, Paige, you're going to bring in the wrong type of interest here. And I was like, I don't know that I am. I think that people are ready for this type of education. And both the owner of the property and my father were very concerned that, the law enforcement was going to come in and check in things. And I was like, I'm not doing anything wrong here. We do not have psilocybin mushrooms on site. We are not having or encouraging anybody in partaking in drugs. We're genuinely just having education. So if they want to come in, I would love for them to come in and take these workshops. I don't have a problem with that. And I was just incredibly firm about that over and over again. So no, I guess it's a short, very minimal.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Mostly the people that cared about me.
As they should, right? As they should share some interest. So I find that curious too, that law enforcement didn't.
If there was anyone there that was a law enforcement officer, I didn't meet them.
Yeah.
Unless they were there. I do know of a person that was coming in a different sanction that is a police officer somewhere that did not come in that capacity, was just coming for their own personal interest.
Yeah.
And purposely did not tell other people they were an officer.
Well, of course. Yeah.
So, and that's, I think that's good. I think there needs to be safe spaces where people can learn more.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Well, we'll see you there. Well, the plan's to be there. We want to learn about it and talk to people about it. And, we've watched plenty of videos, but you never feel like you're connecting to somebody at that point. Well,
and one of the things I was also trying to do with the Kentucky Mushroom Festival is to make sure that it was 30 to 40% psychedelic education, but 60% of we're going to work on Appalacha, what's the word I'm looking for? Culture, Appalachian culture. We're going to have square dancing. We're going to have bluegrass music. We're going to focus on permaculture in the area and focusing on the other types of mushrooms, morels, chicken of the woods, chanterelles. And, it's about all mushrooms, culinary side. And that way it really can appeal to a wider range of people. There is a little bit of more energetic or self-development piece of that, but I tried to keep it minimal since my other events are so heavy on it.
And let's say it one more time. This isn't just about magic mushrooms. This festival is not just about magic mushrooms and that type of thing. So, we need to be clear on that. It's all mushrooms, all education on all mushrooms.
All mushrooms. Yeah. Absolutely. We have that psychedelic piece because it's important, but that's like a smaller piece of the event. We're really about Appalachian culture and education in all the forms of Kentucky and the region's mushrooms.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gonna go chicken of the wood, morel season right now.
I
haven't found one yet, but I know in Bedford, Kentucky near me that somebody found 200 and I'm so stoked. Wow.
We found some, we had I call it Fernville, where I just have different ferns. Nothing really grows, right? It's dark and moist. And I thought
that's a great spot.
It is. Yeah. And we got 6 or 7 different types of ferns in there. And so a couple years ago, some, morels, what we always call morels, would pop up.
Yeah.
And I was walking through the yard a couple days ago and I thought in a different spot and I was like, oh my gosh, they're here. I don't think they were. I think they were a collective of leaves or something that fallen off a tree, but they still had the same texture and look to it. I was like, what are they doing over here? This is awesome. We tried to cook with those and we couldn't get the flavor right. So it didn't turn out for us. We just assumed we did something wrong with it.
Yeah. You got to find Good Appalachian to teach you the recipe.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Maybe we'll find it at the festival.
Yeah, I always grew up calling them dryland fish, and putting them in cornmeal and different things, and it's just really delicious. Salt, pepper.
Yeah.
Pretty low key. Nothing super fancy, and doing that like saute, pan fry, cast iron skillet's important. But I learned so much about the culture of mushrooms through growing up in the woods of Kentucky, going hiking with my dad, going deer hunting, and that being a byproduct of being there. And so my dad, as I mentioned before, is a historian, and he's featured in some of the Foxfire books. He built 1700 style black powder long rifles.
Oh, nice.
So I was really immersed in some of those back to the land habits is not the word I'm looking for, practices. And it just naturally was part of my life.
Well, I was going to ask, I don't know where I had a question with that, but tying in, so we're trying to garden more, and we cordoned off a section of our yard. I hate to weed eat, by the way, so I'm trying to figure out if I can get rid of every opportunity to weed eat, I will be happy. That may be what you coach me on. But we started, all right, let's block off a section, and I still need to build a greenhouse, and one day I will, but let's block off a section, see how this works, and see what we can do with it. And we had some mushrooms pop up. We do the hay bale gardening. And so through that, as you're waiting on everything to get ready to plant, a big bunch of mushrooms popped up. So I downloaded the apps, like, can we eat these? Or,
Probably not.
No. No, don't eat those.
I can only identify about 4 to 5 different types of mushrooms and feel fairly confident in my ability. And there are other people, of course, that are really, really good at doing it. But even then, I'm like, okay, morels, every single time I know what they are. Chanterelles, there are some lookalikes that are similar. I'm still looking at the internet to make sure that I'm good. Chicken of the woods is the same way. I found a white chicken of the woods last year for the first time, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know these existed. I definitely had to look it up. But I think that those are the basics. And it's something that I try to teach my son. I'm like, okay, sycamore trees, they're white at the top. What we say is the more you go up, the sicker they look. And that's how we recognize what a sycamore tree is. And it's always near water. So those like very basic back to the land practices that we can just add a little bit more simplicity and be more connected to nature and therefore ourselves.
Yeah.
And small little things.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be much.
Well, so for the garden, we're interested in growing some mushrooms because we thought, I like the flavor of, but I don't know anything about them. And so, we've got that app to look at whatever is growing. To me, it's a mushroom. And so, again, coming from the authentic, the ignorant side here, no, there's thousands of different styles of mushrooms.
So many.
Yeah. It's like I think it just became a challenge for us to say, okay, well, then let's figure out what is what. And
very few of them are edible.
Yeah, very few. Yeah. Yeah. But we thought, well, maybe we can grow those in the garden.
Yeah.
To bring different flavors or whatever.
So did you?
We did not last year.
Okay.
No. And once we got, this big thing that happened on the hay bales, we already had a plan for what the hay bales were for. So we haven't done that yet.
I've never grown any type of mushrooms. It's clueless to me.
Well, they seem pretty finicky to grow. So that's part of the challenge too, I think.
Yeah.
So we'll figure it out. What about on laws, Kentucky's laws? Are you involved in, it seems like you would become a pretty logical person to help lead some of this stuff.
I don't even know the current Kentucky laws. I keep myself fairly ignorant.
Yeah.
I live in my little rural part of the world. I'm not against it. If somebody were to invite me and want me to be involved, I would probably try to be involved in some fashion, but it's not been something that I've naturally found coming at me.
Yeah. I think it's just a matter of time.
Okay. It's kind of scary.
I'll clarify that to mean it's as a pure compliment to you that you are positioning yourself as this, the person to get it done, the person to make it happen. And just by doing that, by you seeking your own education, you become very educated. And by being very educated, you are way more educated than the people that are probably making the laws or whoever they're listening to draft these things. I'm not real current on the laws for that stuff either, for like mushrooms and cannabis, et cetera. But I know that there's pushes coming. And I think we're just a couple years away from seeing big changes in our laws.
I have mixed emotions about it too. Sometimes I'm very happy. I'm like, all right, these things are becoming legal in a way that people are going to have better access, cleaner access, because that's the biggest concern right now is that people are they're not overdosing. They're being poisoned. They're being murdered through a poison that they don't even know exists. And by it becoming more accessible through legality, then people are less likely to be murdered, which I think is awesome. But at the same point, we're putting that legalization in the hands of a group of people that are then going to add things in the same way that they did cigarettes, where we used to go grow tobacco in the field, roll it up and smoke it. I didn't personally, but
right.
And now it's filled with however many chemicals and packaged and sold. And I'm curious what's the leap between legality and that? And I don't know. And I don't know if we can have control over it.
Yeah, that's the big debate. I don't know. I don't know what that is. You could certainly make an argument that tobacco is very similar to cannabis and similar to mushrooms in the fact that they're organic. They grow from the earth. It's a plant.
And still has medicinal properties.
But mankind has turned it into a cancer stick and filled with a lot of different stuff. So, yeah, I'd like to think that it would be different, but history would tell us.
History.
Well, whatever the saying is, right? Those who fail to study history. Yeah, that's a good point. I really haven't considered what you thought there, that sure enough, if any of those things become legal, what would be altered?
Exactly.
In the final production pieces of it.
I mean, how is, I know that there are dispensaries across the United States now that are legal. Is the marijuana that you can get there different than what I would assume so. I honestly don't smoke marijuana and haven't in many, many, many years. It's just not my thing. So I'm kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah, I know next to zero on the topic. I know there's a lot of different strains, and I know that if you go to those dispensaries, you can pick out, whatever fits your fancy for that particular moment. And I guess, craft an experience out of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know how that translates into the cornfields of Kentucky and,
yeah, me either.
What people are growing here. And then once it's harvested here, what's it mixed with? And, God knows what's actually in the bag when you get it. So
I assume fentanyl is not being used in marijuana, but I honestly am clueless on that whole scheme of things.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I really feel like I'm probably more ignorant than anything else.
Yeah. 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 Maybe so. Right. I mean, but you also have a great knowledge base too, because of your initiatives to want to grow and to know more. So let's have a festival and learn about it. So yeah.
I mean, what better way to learn than to bring every expert of a topic to one location?
That's right.
And that's always how I felt about it. I don't know. As a young kid, even my parents were both very much into like, be a critical thinker, learn from those around you, have mentors. And, if you want to know more, then figure out who's done it ahead of you. And that's been one of my mantras this whole time.
I love the approach, right? Instead of going to another festival to learn, you just said, heck with that. I'll just hold my own and invite all the instructors to me. What a genius idea.
Well, one of the things for me is, even when I started going to festivals in my younger 20s, is that I have never been a big drinker. My dad's an alcoholic. I realize I keep bringing up my dad, but he's just such an important figure in my life. He's been sober for 20 years as of this year. And so he told me as a young child, he was like, I didn't become an alcoholic until I was 37. And I held that in my head. And even though I drank when I was younger, and I still have a drink 4 or 5 times a year, I had it in my head, like, you can't abuse this. You have to be really careful with this. And I knew that at other festivals, they were party. They were a big party.
Yeah.
And it was not what I wanted. It never felt good. And so one of my reasons I started PlayThink, which was well before I even thought of having a son, was that I wanted it to be open to all ages. And then I wanted it to be safe, which meant no alcohol, because alcohol has inherently been unsafe for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. How was Burning Man?
Which time?
Yes.
So I've been 3 times.
Not this last. Was it this last year that got mudded out?
It was. And I do want to I want to mention that as one of my pet peeves. As we all know, that the news sensationalizes things.
Yeah.
It was not as bad as the news has said it was based on my friends.
That is hard to believe.
So I didn't go last year, but
it wasn't Armageddon and whatever else.
I think they actually had more fun.
Yeah, right.
So I went year before last in whatever 22.
Sure.
22, yeah. And it was hot. It was 112 in the days, which is hotter than I had previously been. It did not get cold at night, which had happened previously. The dust storms were so miserable that I got lost on the way to the bathrooms a block away from me. Like it was just, and they were 8 hours long. So it was kind of miserable. But I did meet Paul Stamets, as I said. So it was still a great trip. Honestly, it is the world's most intelligent people coming together with the most glorious ideas that they're generally just bringing to fruition for fun. They're usually also the richest. Let's be real.
At Burning Man?
At Burning Man. And the amount of art there is just mind-blowingly ecstatic for the senses. I feel like it's art coming to life in the best way possible, in ways that we don't get to see today.
Oh, I wonder if that's explained really anywhere. I mean, the videos that I've watched on it, I've never been.
Oh, it's a party.
It's just a party.
I've never partied at Burning Man.
Now, I've seen the sculptures, I guess they have the inner circle, whatever, the sculptures are there. So, it touches on the art part of it, but I've never heard it explained like you said, the world's brightest minds coming together there. I
mean, I was camped like 3 blocks from Elon Musk.
Really?
I didn't get to meet him.
Right.
But I know that it's like the richest, most amazing minds of the world that are coming to have a good time with community.
Back to community.
Yeah.
I like logistics are always on my mind, right? And so as we've been talking about your festivals, I'm in my head, I'm running like, how do you park? How do you get staff to help people park?
They don't. There is not staff there. When you roll in, you have an idea. So they map you ahead of time. They say, okay, you're at 3 and E or whatever the case may be, because they work their map in a radius like a clock, with spokes being the alphabet.
This is at Burning Man?
At Burning Man,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so when you're like, okay, I'm at 3 and E or whatever the case may be, and you pull in and they have flags, like little, construction style flags marking it with the numbers on it. And that's the only way that you know where you're going. There's not staff members there to park you. The logistics behind their parking is amazing, genius, and I don't even understand how they have mapped that out. It's awe-inspiring for me.
So when I watch stuff on Burning Man, this is what I'm looking at to say, look at the concentric circles of parking.
Yep. And so this goes in a clock,
right.
I said. So it, starts at, I don't actually remember, maybe 10 a.m. all the way to 10 p.m. And each one is like A, B, C, D, E, all the way back.
And how many people is this? This is,
I think last year they had 80,000.
I was going to guess 100,000. So you've got 80,000 people coming to this, mm-hmm. and collectively they all get in, get set up.
It's a whole city.
And do their thing.
Yeah. And so the idea of Burning Man is that
look at that one over there. Yeah. Gosh.
It's a gift economy. So the only thing that you can buy while you're there is ice, and money is not used otherwise. And it exists on 10 different principles, which I'm not going to be able to recite, but one of them is radical self-reliancy. So you come in with everything that you would need for the time that you're there. They give you suggestions on how much water, how much food, etc.
Right.
And that forces a community to actually come together as community and as neighbors. Because if you're missing something, all of a sudden you can go to your neighbor and ask for it. And a lot of the theme camps are set up in such a way that you're gifting automatically to the community. The first 2 years that I was there, I camped with Kentucky Fried Camp. So it's a collective from Kentucky. And we gave away fried bologna sandwiches and bourbon shots for breakfast each morning.
Very fitting.
Very fitting. Yeah. And actually, Kentucky Fried Camp is going to come and set up a theme camp at PlayThink this coming year.
Yes.
They are not doing bourbon shots because sober
event.
But they're going to do a toddler corral to take care of toddlers and still do fried bologna sandwiches.
That's awesome.
And then this past year, I camped with a camp called, I actually don't remember what it was called.
Yeah.
And we were offering performances to the crew. So we did fire performances and performed in the fire conclave.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And they were a group out of Texas.
How cool. Yeah, that's awesome. All right. What back on your festivals? What else we need to talk about? What else we need to let the people know about?
So the festivals, as I've said, come back to community, but I found them getting large enough that I no longer could be face to face with people. So I go around on a golf cart. I'm making sure that things in the background are happening. I am dealing face to face with a lot of performers, musicians, but I'm not able to work with the people one-on-one. And so I started the smaller events, the Goddexx Initiative. And now I do an international retreat in Tulum once a year. And then I'm starting an event this August called Sanctuary Series, which is more about emotional intimacy with people. And then on the coaching, it all came to I wanted to be more face to face with people. I learn more when I get to talk to people one on one, and I feel like I can be of service to people more when I'm one to one. And so,
yeah, that's awesome. So we're going to have all your links, and we'll make sure we get those right before we part ways. But we're going to have all your links in the show notes. And then anything else that you want put in those show notes, we'll have those. So whoever's listening, if you, if you have interest in any of this stuff and listen, your crowds are coming not just from Kentucky, they're coming from all around.
We have 39 or 40-ish states represented for PlayThink.
Yeah.
Kentucky Yoga Festival hits at least 8 states in the region, which is odd, it being the name Kentucky. I don't have proper analytics for the Mushroom Festival since it's only a year old.
Yeah, that's right. But without a doubt, you're getting...
Absolutely.
You're getting a wide range of people there because of just the topic and the desire to learn about that.
I don't know, for me, being of service to other people is the highest thing that I can do in the world. Yeah.
A lot of truth in that. Listen, I found this fascinating. It's been a great morning for us and a great day. And it's been fun to communicate with you and to learn about all these things that are out there that you're doing. So thanks for sharing it with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Anything else we need to put on here before we go?
I can't think of a thing.
Well, if we do, we'll do another show.
All right.
Thanks for being here. All right.
Thank you.
See you.